And we're live. Hello
Excellent.
and welcome. So I see that a bunch of people have already joined. So without further ado, we're just going to launch right in. Welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to be learning more about the new European Sustainability Reporting Standards, what they mean for your company, but also what you can do to address one of the important parts of the ESRS, which is to cut your emissions, because you do need to include some sort of mitigation plans for the future as well. Before we dig into the actual content, just a little bit of housekeeping rules. I know you all know the drill, but I'll just cover it anyway. You as the audience are muted, so we cannot hear you, but you can pose questions at any point in time. So if you look to the bottom right of your screen, you will see a questions button. You can pop questions there during the whole session, and we will be answering them at the end. In case you want to come back and review something, you're going to receive a recording of the session by a link with an email after the session. So you can come back to this webinar anytime. Now, during the call, you might notice some dialogue pop-up windows coming up because we will be asking you for your input. So you might see a couple of poll questions pop up on your screen. You can just click to participate. We will also be sharing some links in the same way. So if you click on the links in the little pop-ups, it will open in a fresh tab so that you can have a look at the useful content that we're sharing with you. All right, that's the housekeeping. Now I'd like to introduce myself first. I'm Elena McCafferty. I'm the Director of ESG here at Alpega Group. I've been looking a lot into how our solutions can help customers reduce their carbon footprints in their logistics processes. It's a very interesting topic that I have a lot of personal stake in, and that's why I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Maja Piecik today. Maja is a professor in logistics at the University of Westminster and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. She leads the University of Westminster's input to the Centre for Sustainable Road Freight and Decarbonising the UK's Freight Transport Network. Her research has been focusing on environmental performance and sustainability of freight transport operations. And her current work focuses on city logistics, CSR, greenhouse gas emissions auditing of businesses, and forecasting long-term trends in energy demand, as well as environmental impacts of logistics. So I'm very pleased to have her as an expert here to provide insights. Before I hand over to Maja, I just want to give a small bit of background of why we at Alpega are hosting these sessions. I mentioned before, I've been looking a lot at what impact our solutions have. We know that it's not just companies and governments that really want to make a difference and need to make a difference. Everybody that I've spoken to in the logistics industry wants to make a difference. So we've really been trying to quantify how do we help customers, how do companies help themselves reduce their emissions across the entire logistics process. And we've been finding that, okay, there is no one single solution, but along every step of the way, most of the actions that you can take to increase your operational efficiency will also have a direct impact on emissions. So we can really truthfully say that it is a win-win situation. If you're as efficient as possible in your operations, you can also reduce your emissions. And we're going to be learning much more about how to do that from Maja today. So without further ado, Maja, take it away, please.
Okay, welcome and thank you for this introduction, Alina. So today I'm going to cover three main things. So I'm going to talk briefly about what is ESRS and what it means for your business. I will then focus on why it's important to focus on greenhouse gas emissions from logistics, and I will conclude with a brief review of various ways these emissions can be reduced. So as Alina said, I'm an academic. I work at University of Westminster in London, and my main focus is on green logistics, carbon footprinting, and reducing emissions from freight transport. On the left-hand side, there are a few examples of various reports and books and outputs from projects I've been working on. Currently, my main focus is on city logistics, and I'm also leading the university contribution to the Center for Sustainable Road Freight. The Center for Sustainable Road Freight is a project based on a partnership between three universities, so Westminster, Heriot-Watt in Scotland, and University of Cambridge. And we also have a number of partners from the industry, policy, and trade groups. And we all work together on various ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We look at various technology options, we look at operational improvements, and we also look at policy interventions that will be necessary to take us into the low carbon future. So there is a website, there's a project website you can see on the slides. So I would encourage you to go and look because we have lots of very useful resources on that website. I will be talking about some of them more in this webinar, and we also give you a pop-up links to click on when that happens. But there is a lot of useful materials that you can find on that website there. So what is ESRS? The European Sustainability Reporting Standards were developed as part of Europe's sustainability agenda, and they are a part of a so-called Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, and that directive entered into force earlier this year. So the main aim of ESRS is to improve the public accountability of companies to combat greenwashing and promote green investments by providing verified and reliable information about companies' sustainable performance. The CSRD replaces the existing non-financial reporting directive, and it does it in two ways. So it increases the number of companies that have to report, and it also significantly increases the scope of what needs to be reported. The good news about the ESRS is that they are consistent with a number of existing standards and methodologies. So, for example, they are closely aligned with the existing GRA standards. GRA stands for Global Reporting Initiative and is the main established methodology the companies use to report on their sustainable performance. The recent data suggests that about 70% of large companies in Europe already use the GRI framework in their reporting. When we looked at the logistics industry, it shows that this sector is lagging behind because only 13% of the top logistics companies from around the world and representing different logistics services. So all sorts of logistics services were involved in that surveys. Only 13% of those reported on the CSR, corporate sustainability reporting performance, but half of those reported use the GRI framework. So the good news here is that those who already use the GRI standards don't have to change the data collection and the reporting methods. They will have to build on what they already doing, and it's also consistent with greenhouse gas protocol, various ISO standards, and so on and so on. So at least we're not reinventing something new. At least we can build off what's already is being done by some of the companies. So before we move any further, we have a question for you. So our first poll questions that will pop up on your screen about now is, are you already reporting? And if you are reporting, are you using the GRI standards? And the option A is yes, we are reporting and we're following the GRI standards. The option B is we are reporting but not following the GRI standards, and option C is we are not reporting but getting prepared to do so, and option D is we are not reporting. And I will go to my poll pop-up now. And we're still waiting for some people to vote.
In case you've closed the dialog box, you can see the results on the right of your screen. There's a little button polls at the bottom right of the screen, and you can open that anytime to see the results.
Okay. So it looks like most people online are currently not reporting on the sustainable performance, or reporting and not following the GRI standards. So if you will be covered by the CSRD, then you have a challenge ahead of you, because the framework and the standards is quite developed, and the scope is the scope of reporting is quite broad. So the initial 12 standards are already available online on the EFRAG website. That's the organization that is in charge of preparing those standards. The drafts are still waiting to be approved by the European Commission later this year, so in June 2023. So they still may change a bit from what's there, but I wouldn't expect any dramatic changes at this point. The first two standards provide the background information about what and how it needs to be reported. And then there are 10 topical standards, so they cover specific topics such as climate change, biodiversity, the workforce, or corporate governance. There will be further standards developed later this year to be adopted in 2024, and this will cover specific sectors. So at the moment, the EFRAG works on 10 sector standards. The first 5 will cover the sectors already covered by GRI, such as, for example, agriculture, and also 5 high impact sectors, so-called high impact sectors, including road transport and vehicle manufacturing. There will be also a specific standard for small and medium enterprises covered by the CSRD. So the reporting obligation covers all large and all listed companies, including small and medium ones, except the listed micro enterprises. The large companies are defined as those who meet at least 2 of the following criteria. So more than 250 employees, the net turnover over 40 million euros, or asset over 20 million euros. At the later stage, the reporting obligation will also apply to non-EU companies who meet certain criteria, and that is expected to level off the playing field between EU and non-EU companies, and also to make sure the company that's causing an impact in the EU is accountable for that impact. So in terms of timelines, the CSRD was approved by the EU and entered into force in early January this year. The EU countries will now have to enact that directive in their own national legislation. The European Commission is expected to adopt the ESRS, the standards, in later this year, so in June this year, and also to adopt the sector-specific standards next year. The CSRD requirements will first apply to the companies that are currently required to report under the NFRD, so Non-Financial Reporting Directive. So the companies who are currently expected to report, they will have to start next year with the first reports due in 2025. From 2025, all other companies falling under the CSRD will have to start collecting data to publish the first reports in 2026. The SMEs are expected to start reporting in 2026, but they can opt out for the first 2 years. So there is a transition period for them, so they can delay the start date until 2028. And from 2028, also the new non-EU companies that are falling under the CSRD directive will also have to start collecting the data and publish the first reports in 2029. Okay, so that was a very brief introduction into what's coming, and I will now move on to briefly mention the reasons why a measure, report, and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from logistics. Okay, so it's estimated that freight transport and logistics activities account for about 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And that is still growing because of the increasing demand, despite the significant efficiencies in the sector. So this graph presents the modeling results from the International Transport Forum, and it shows the expected emissions from freight transport activities in 2030 and 2050 under 3 different policy scenarios. So in the case of business as usual, so if we continue with the existing set of policies, the freight CO2 emissions are likely to increase by around a quarter by 2050. So this 22% increase is largely inconsistent with all the legislations we have in place to get us to net zero carbon world by 2050. So that means there will definitely be more focus on decarbonizing the freight transport sector, and there will be policies coming in that will put more obligation and put more emphasis of reducing the emissions from the sector. And road as the main mode of domestic transport is definitely something to look at. And also another important area is the urban delivery. That's also largely happening by road as it is, because those sectors contribute quite a significant proportion of greenhouse gas emissions. So these are the activities that we should be focusing on. Okay. So there are numbers of reasons to measure and reduce greenhouse gases, and most of these reasons will also apply to sustainability initiatives in general. So first of all, as I mentioned, we have increasing international and national legislation that will require to intensify the efforts. UK was actually the first country in the world to introduce a legally binding greenhouse gas reduction target in 2008. So back then, it only committed to 80% reduction by 2050. Now this has been increased to net zero. We also have the European climate law, which also introduces the net zero target in the EU by 2050, and other countries are also making commitments to significantly reduce the emissions. So they will be more and more focused on making sure countries and corporations intensify the efforts to cut the emissions and to get us to those targets. The relatively new but relevant development is the extension of European emission trading systems to cover fuel for road transport and buildings to be established by 2027. So that system will put a price on emissions from those fuels. And initially, for the first 3 years, the carbon price is going to be capped at 45 euro per ton. And it's already estimated by various trade bodies that this is likely to translate into extra 12 cents per liter of diesel. For comparison, the ETS carbon price in 2022 fluctuated between 60 to 100 euro per ton. So if that cap on road fuel is removed, that can significantly increase fuel prices in the future. So that gives an extra incentive to reduce the fuel consumptions and also reduce, as a result, reduce the cost of fuel and greenhouse gas emissions. There are a number of other reasons. It's the research and evidence already shows that being a green supplier or energy efficient supplier and sustainability in general increases the attractiveness as a potential suppliers, and it's already included in sourcing strategies. In some countries, that's more common practice than the others, but with the new reporting obligation, this is likely to gain in importance in the future. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transport often involves so-called green gold measures. So the measures that increase the efficient use of resources and not only cut the greenhouse gas emissions, but also generate cost savings. As customers become very environmentally aware, being a green provider can lead to competitive advantage, increased attractiveness to the investment community. Product and service can drive the efforts to reduce emissions, can drive product and service innovation. And also multiple reports shows that being a company that cares about sustainability is something future employees look for. So almost 70% of people in the younger age brackets, so up to 24, consider sustainability as something important in the selection of company they want to work for. So attracting talent, to attract new talent, it's important to consider your sustainable performance. So how best to prepare? So whether or not your company is going to fall under the CSRD, it's definitely worth looking at sustainable performance, because even if you're not required to report yourself, there is a good chance your supply chain partner will be, and they will probably get in touch with you to request the appropriate data and information they have to include in their reports, because the way the reporting is designed under the ESRS, it requires the value chain information. So even the non-reporting companies are likely to be approached to provide the data and information. If you if you covered by the CSDR and need to report following the ESRS, the drafts are already available on the EFRAG website. You can have a look at those. If you, the other useful resources are the GRI framework and the greenhouse gas protocol. So there is a lot of useful materials available on the GRI and greenhouse gas protocol websites. In terms of reporting the logistics emissions, the GLEC framework is very useful there. It's consistent with the greenhouse gas protocol as well. So that's a very good resource, and there may be some good national resources available. So for example, the UK government publishes every year, publishes and updates a very comprehensive inventory of emission factors for various activities that companies can use in their annual reporting. So there's plenty of resources available, but these, I would say, are good starting points for what you may need. Okay. So it's now time to move on to the third part of this presentation to discuss opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from freight transport. And in our research, we developed a new so-called green logistics framework to map out the opportunities to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. The earlier version of this framework is described in the Green Logistics book. So on the top right corners, you have the screenshot of the front page of that book. The Green Logistics book summarizes the outcome of one of our former projects, and for the purpose of this presentation, I slightly modified the framework and to provide a more disaggregated view of some of the drivers of the emissions and to show what actions can be taken to reduce the emissions. So if you would like a copy of this framework, it can be downloaded from a pop-up window that that should have now popped up on your screen. So you can download the slide if you want to keep a copy for your records. So this framework is quite versatile because it can guide, we use it to guide our research on a macro level, so we can use it at the national or international scale, but it can also be used by individual companies to understand the drivers of individual company greenhouse gas emissions and what levers you can pull to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. So to the left, we have a number of aggregates describing the level of freight transport activity and resulting greenhouse gas emissions. In the middle, we have a number of key parameters influencing the magnitude of those outputs. And to the right, we have the disaggregated drivers of environmental performance. For example, if we start with the weight of goods produced or transported by a company, by using a modal split factor, we determine the proportion of goods moved by road. Then the handling factor, so the number of times the goods are being loaded and unloaded as they move the supply chain, and the length of haul will determine the road ton kilometers. And the handling factor and length of haul are determined by the supply chain structure, so the location of our own facilities, the number and location of our own facilities, but also locations of the suppliers and customer. So not everything here is within the company's direct within the company's direct control. But it's definitely something to consider, and also the efficiency of vehicle routing is an important factor here. Okay. Then next, we have loading factor and empty running that determine vehicle utilization. And vehicle utilization translates the load ton kilometers into the total distance travel. And things to consider here are vehicle carrying capacity. So what size of vehicle do you use? How well we load them on the laden trip? And what is the proportion of vehicles running empty? So how effective we are in finding backloads. So that's a very important part of that framework. Fuel efficiency then translates the vehicle kilometers into the total fuel consumption, and we have various fuel management measures that will determine the fuel efficiency, but also timing of deliveries is important here. And then at the bottom of the framework, we look at the greenhouse gas intensity of fuel. And that applies to whether we use conventional diesel fuel or we also include some alternative fuel options to run our vehicle fleet. So I'm going to discuss some of these elements in greater details in the following slides. But before we move on to that, we have another poll question to ask you: what measures do you currently use in your operations? So you can now use the pop-up window to tell us what are the actions you are currently taking. So option A is we use non-road transport modes. Option B is we use freight exchanges to secure backloads. Option C is we use dock management to reduce idling. Option E is we train and monitor driver. And option F or 5 is we routing and scheduling software. If there's anything else you're using, but it's not on our list, you can use the chat box to tell us about it. But I'm going to go to my polls section and see what's happening. So we have 15, 16 votes. Okay, 21 votes. Give final chance people to respond. Okay, so it looks like the use on non-road transport modes is the most popular measure. And also the routing and scheduling software, which I think it's quite widespread in the industry, freight exchanges, dock management, and monitor drivers. So these are all important things. So thank you for that. It was actually interesting to see the use of non-road transport modes as the most popular option. Because a lot of the time when we talk to companies, they say, oh, it's difficult, it's not suitable for our operations, and there are all sorts of reasons why non-road transport is not even considered. So it's good to see some evidence that it's actually happening. And it's a good news because road after air transport is the second most greenhouse gas intensive transport mode. So shifting freight to more sustainable transport modes is good use. There are some good examples of companies using non-road transport modes. So, for example, in the UK, a lot of my research is in the UK, so that's why I tend to use a lot of UK examples. Tesco and Asda have been making use of rail since early 2000. So Asda started the service in 2001, and Tesco uses rail for their deliveries since 2008, and more recently they even started running refrigerated trains, and each of those trains removes 40 HGVs from UK roads and saves a significant amount of CO2. More recently, the increasing wage inflation in the sector and the shortage of HGV drivers also provide additional operational benefits of being able to use different transport modes. So that's definitely something to consider, especially that modal shift is quite prominent in the EU agenda, and there are lots of initiatives taking place to support businesses to move freight to non-road modes as well. Okay, the other important drivers or levers you can pull that were included in the framework is the routing and timing of deliveries. So according to CBRS providers, so routing system providers, these systems typically deliver cost savings or 10 to 20%. The International Energy Agency is a bit more conservative in their estimate of energy savings that will then translate into cost savings. So they estimate more in a range of up to 10%, depending on the type of operation. And the actual benefit will obviously depend on your starting point and how efficient your routing is in the first place. So, but there is an option to look if you're not using a package. There is something to definitely to look at. The 4 graphs on the slide come from a paper I prepared with my colleague Andrew Palmer. So in that paper, we modeled 56 journeys, again in the UK, to estimate the best and the worst start time for those journeys. So in these graphs, we have a profile for a typical journey. That particular journey was about 170 kilometers long. And depending on the start time, the time to complete the journey took between 2 hours, 20 minutes and 3 hours. So there is a significant variation in the time it took to travel those 170 kilometers. And also variation in the CO2 and cost associated with this journey as a result. And for the whole sample of 56 journeys, there was 30% difference between the best and the worst start time in the journey profile. So timing of your deliveries is definitely something to look at. So if you can reschedule your operation to make sure the goods can travel in the non-congested times, that's definitely something to look at, and that can bring significant benefits. Okay. As I said, the vehicle utilization is a key to lowering the CO2 emissions. So in that study for the European Chemical Council, we looked at how CO2 emissions for the 44-ton HGV can vary depending on the levels of empty running and the degree to which the vehicle is loaded. So there can be around threefold difference between a vehicle that has 40% empty running and it's only half loaded for for the rest of the journey, and a vehicle that is fully loaded and has very low or none of the empty running. So using freight exchanges to find backloads, moving goods in full loads when possible, so consolidating of your goods to make sure your vehicles are fully loaded can significantly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So vehicle utilization is definitely a very important factor to consider in any attempts to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. The fuel management definitely falls into three broad areas. So the first one is vehicle design, maintenance, and then vehicle operations. So in terms of vehicle design, first of all, it's important to take greenhouse gas emissions and fuel efficiency into account when purchasing new vehicles, because new vehicles can vary significantly in their weight and the fuel efficiency. So it's definitely worth looking into it when acquiring new vehicles. The second thing is you should always choose the largest possible vehicle that you can fully load. If looking back at my slide showing the greenhouse gas intensity of road transport, it clearly shows the largest vehicles, if they can be fully loaded, have the lowest impact. And also alternative fuel vehicles will be necessary if we aiming for net zero or very low carbon operations, because efficiency improvements in diesel vehicles can only take us so far. So if we really want to take our operations to net zero, to zero or very low carbon transport, we also need to look at other options. Vehicle maintenance can have a significant benefit as well. So regular maintenance schedule, making sure the wheels are aligned, the tires are properly inflated, and vehicles are clean, so there is no debris or adding weight to them, is also very important. And a lot of the benefit can be achieved by training the drivers to drive in the fuel efficient way. And I was also quite surprised not to see that as one of the most popular measures, because a lot of companies are already doing it. And it gives immediate benefit in the range of 3 to 9%. Most of companies I've spoken to quote the benefit towards the higher end of that spectrum. However, it's necessary to monitor the drivers. So to keep the long-term benefits, it's necessary to monitor the drivers and provide them with the constant feedback. What works quite well is also some incentive scheme for drivers to keep the good performance going and to drive in a way that avoids unnecessary acceleration, idling, and also includes appropriate coasting. So driving is definitely something to look at. Okay, so in the Center for Sustainable Road Freight, we look at number of different measures. So this graph shows an estimate of potential benefits from implementing various measures, and it also maps them against the ease of implementation. So we have barriers at the horizontal axis and the estimated impact along the vertical axis. The red circles indicate individual company measures. The green circles indicate where more than one company has to come together to cooperate in some way to achieve the benefits. So this may be a bit more difficult to implement. So a more detailed descriptions of those measures is available on the project website. We also have tools that may be very useful if you're looking for the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gases for your company. So, for example, one tool we developed in the duration of this project is called SRF Optimizer. You should get a pop-up box to link to that tool shortly. But that SRF Optimizer allows you to input basic information about your vehicle fleet. So what types of vehicles do you use? What is the annual distance? What type of operation? Is it long haul driving, urban operation? And that gives a range of possible measures you can implement, but it also prioritizes those measures in terms of the shortest payback period. So it suggests the green gold measures, prioritizes the green gold measures. So that tool is very useful. It's available for anyone to use free of charge, and you need to register, but anyone can use it, and it comes with the user guide as well. So if you're looking at ways to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, it's definitely something useful to look at. Okay, so just to conclude, how to prepare for what's coming. Well, if you're going to fall under the CSRD, you can start familiarizing yourself with the draft ESRS, because they are, the existing ones are probably unlikely to change very much between now and when they actually approved. Even if you're not going to have to report, then it's definitely worth looking at understanding the impact a bit better and using some existing guidelines to decide what data to look for and what you should be looking at. It can be useful to look at the best practice example of reports other companies in your sector are publishing. So how they report and what they report and what the reports look like might be something useful to do. Then the key is to understand what data will be needed and also establish means to collect the data. And the way the standards are designed, that may not only involve the internal data, but also information you need from your supply chain partners, or information you will be asked to provide to your supply chain partners. And another source of data is also may also need to come from external sources. So when you cannot find primary data about your actual operations, there may be some external emission factors you can supplement your reporting with. And obviously, I hope in the last part I gave you a quick overview of ideas how it may be possible to reduce your emissions in the future. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that useful, and I would welcome any questions or comments from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Maya. This was really, really eye-opening, and I just wanted to note that a lot of the levers that you mentioned that companies can pull to reduce their emissions, there are tools out there to help with this, so it doesn't have to incur a lot of extra effort. Coming back to that win-win notion from the start. And we have a number of questions in the questions box, so I'll start reading those out, and Maya, maybe you can just go ahead and respond. I'll start with the first one, a question from Dirk. What are your thoughts on calculating or modeling emissions with key figures, like GLEC, versus calculating and allocating emissions with primary data? E.g., with a price on CO2 expected, will calculating with key figures be accepted in the future?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, the primary data is tends to be always more accurate than emission factors based on secondary data that are developed by taking as an industry as a whole. So whenever you can use your primary data, that should give you a more accurate results and more useful result rather than using secondary data. So I would recommend using the primary data whenever possible. And the second part of the question, whether the using of the secondary data would be allowed with the emission trading scheme, I don't know that, but no, I know that. So the use of secondary data will be allowed under the CSRD. So the ESRS will allow to use ESRS allow the use of secondary data when the primary data is not available or you cannot get it from your supply chain partners. In the new emission trading scheme, the price will be put on suppliers of those fuels. So yes, that will not depend on your reporting. So the price will be put when the fuel, the price will be included when the fuel is purchased, not depending on the individual company reporting, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Maya. The next question was a clarification request for one of your slides. You mentioned monitoring of drivers. The question here is, does that refer to GPS tracking?
Depends on the telematic systems that can monitor fuel consumption, acceleration, and so on and so on. So a lot of the telematic system offer this functionality, and they can even produce the brief report at the end of the shift. So it's important for the supervisor to give periodic feedback to the drivers and to sit with them and say, look, this is where you can do better.
Thank you. There was also a question referring to your slide about future emissions. We saw 3 different scenarios in the chart with recover, reshape, and reshape plus. Could you please tell a little bit about what those 3 things mean?
So the recover basically means business as usual. So that's the set of current policies, and that scenario increases the emissions by about a quarter by 2050, mainly as a result of increasing demand. So that scenario assumes there will be efficiency improvements in line with what we're doing now, but because the demand for freight is growing, then emissions will increase as a result. The reshape and reshape plus, these 2 scenarios assume a different policy mix. So they added they both scenario add a number of different policies to the mix, aiming to lower the emissions. So reshape is the moderate and reshape plus is the most ambitious scenario.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question about one of the acronyms that was used on a slide when you were speaking about fuels. What does WTW stand for?
Well to wheel. So you can the emissions can be counted on tank to wheel, so the actual exhaust emissions, or they can be reported on a well to wheel basis that also include the downstream emissions from the supply chain, so emissions from extracting the fuels and moving the fuel and so on and so on.
Thank you. All right. I believe that's the questions we have for now, unless anybody quickly still posts something now. This has been very eye-opening. I really like seeing that many of the measures you've outlined just make good sense anyway. These are things that companies really should be doing anyhow, simply because it is operational efficiency. It has a financial benefit and it helps the environment. So it really, it shouldn't be a hard sell, I think, for many companies to adopt some of the measures that you told us about. Thank you very much for these insights. Do you have any closing comments you would like to share with our audience today?
I think what I see is, as you said, a lot of those measures make common sense, and they shouldn't be a hard sell to implement. However, when we look at what should be done and the actual implementation rate, even with our quick polls, not many of them are implemented by everyone. So I think a lot of that comes to the awareness and availability of information, how to find the reliable data of the expected benefits. And that's what we try to mitigate with our research project and publicizing and opening the results to the public. So the optimizer tool is one great example of that. Basically, we look for the evidence, we build it into a tool, we make the tool available to everyone, because we academics are not in the business of selling something. We look at the objective evidence. What I see is an issue in the industry, particularly in the road freight sector. A lot of the operators are small companies, often very small, and they really struggle with the day-to-day survival of the business, looking for resources in information. And that is my focus now. So I'm looking at how best to support the smaller end of the industry in making sure they get access to that information as well, and to support those with implementing of some of these measures.
Oh, that's excellent. It's actually interesting you mentioned the small businesses. Now I can share some insight that also the big ones don't always know how to start because they have 101 priorities that kind of govern their day-to-day operations and logistics planning.
Yeah.
Sustainability comes in as one more performance indicator that they have to take into account. It's a lot to keep track of. So even for the larger ones, it is a bit of a struggle. And what we hear a lot is people are really just waiting for good, solid instruction. What do we need to do? What do we do in practical terms? What are the best practices at this stage? And since it's relatively new, not everybody has those yet. So yeah, the awareness work that you mentioned is really vitally important at this stage. And also, thank you very much for the contribution in sharing this knowledge and these perspectives to help in that.
In a way, I understand the ESRS may create a new challenge for the organizations, but in a way, it will also have the indirect benefit of making people think, because ESRS requires not also reporting of the impacts, but it also requires some target setting of what the company plans to do in the future and what are the targets to reduce emissions. So it will hopefully have this indirect benefit of making people think what needs to be done. And I think that's a good thing, as much may not like the new burden of doing things. I think there is a benefit in that too.
Absolutely. And I think that some of the resources you shared today are going to provide some very helpful tools for companies to start looking at what those actions might look like. So, all right, then. Thank you so much for these insights. It is very appreciated. Thank you also for the questions that came in from the audience. Very happy to have you here today. We hope that this has given you some new impulses or different angles to look at. And we very much look forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinars. The next one up is actually a little foray into how Alpega TMS can make migrating to SAP S/4HANA that bit easier. That's coming up on March 22nd, a month from now. We hope to welcome you there as well. And with that, thank you, Maya. Thank you, dear audience. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.